You are listening to Viewpoints from Place Cloud. Cultural researchers tell stories of places from around the world. For the full multimedia experience and to support the creators you enjoy, visit placecloud.io.
We are standing on Devonshire Square, now a rather unassuming place, near the Cooper's Hall. But it is the site of a gruesome and fascinating story. One dark night, between 10 and 11 p.m., on the 24th of September 1747, when the moon was nearing its last quarter, Captain Joseph Johns was walking briskly up Sandwich Court, towards the square, passing behind the Devonshire Square Quaker meeting house. On this ill-lit street, he met two young Jewish men, Jose Yule and Jacob Lopez. Yule was about 18 years of age and had been born in Creechurch Lane off Leadenhall Street nearby. Of Lopez we know very little. The two men robbed Captain Joseph Johns of his watch and money. As they turned to go, Captain Johns let cry, "Stop, thief!" There was no police force in 18th century England. Private individuals took an active role in both the arrest and prosecution of criminals, and were meant to respond to calls of stop thief or murder that were heard in their neighbourhoods. The call normally caused criminals to run. However, one of the thieves, hearing the cry, returned to Captain Joseph Johns and stabbed him to the depth of 9 inches with a sword, before then running off. Captain Johns's call had managed to rouse those living nearby, who did come to his assistance, and he was taken to the Dolphin Inn on Bishopsgate Street, around the corner, and attended by a man named Joseph Grindle, who extracted a piece of the sword that had so mortally wounded his body. Grindle and 3 other men would go on to provide evidence at the Old Bailey trial, and it is from them relaying Captain Joseph Johns' words that we know what occurred. The whole trial can be read on the Old Bailey online. Johns died 3 days after the incident and was buried on the 29th of September at St. Botolph, Bishopsgate. His entry in the parish register simply states the date of burial, his name, and his age of 34. But what of Yule and Lopez? The 2 men had fled the scene, but due to Johns and the witnesses responding to the stop thief call, they were eventually apprehended and faced trial at the Old Bailey. Lopez was found not guilty, but Yule was sentenced to death. The Ordinary of Newgate wrote extensively about Yule and his life. The Ordinary of Newgate was the chaplain tasked with the spiritual welfare of the condemned prisoners and extracting their stories and confessions. The Ordinary's accounts were published up to 8 times a year after 1684, after each hanging day in London. Yule denied the crime for which he was to hang. It appears he had worked as a chocolate maker and selling old clothes at the rag fair. This was a common enough story among the poorer or itinerant Jews of the capital. It was at the rag fair that Yule purchased the sword that would see the end of Joseph Johns. Yule claimed he had given this sword to another man with whom he carried out robberies, and it was this third man that had killed the captain. Yule had actually surrendered himself to the authorities 3 days after the incident. He explained that he, quote, wanted to clear himself. Being asked of what, he began his tale, told them he was a Jew, and that he was so often charged with being guilty of robbing and stabbing the gentleman near Bishopsgate, that he could bear it no longer, and was come resolved to prove the accusation false. End quote. Unfortunately for Yule, Captain Johns was still alive at this point. Yule was brought before the dying man, who identified him as the culprit, and then promptly died. Yule was locked in Newgate Prison, and at his trial, as we know, he was found guilty and sentenced to death. On the 16th of November, 1747, Yule was taken to Tyburn. He was attended by a rabbi who read a service for him. And at this most famous of London hanging sites, Yule met his end. But Yule's story is not quite finished. His body was then displayed in an iron cage upon a vacant gibbet on Stamford Hill, on the site of what is now a Barclays Bank. It was here that he would remain, his corpse held within this cage until nature caused its disintegration, acting as a warning beacon to all who travelled into London of what would occur should they commit a crime in the capital.